Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitnie Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, talking all things leadership. And today we're going to be talking about leadership through the lens of a movie, and maybe not even so much the lens through the movie, but the making of the movie.
Yeah.
And so we'll touch on the movie. This is not, I've got a couple of caveats. This is not a movie review.
No.
It's not a movie critique. I am not a movie critic, an expert. I'm not even a movie commenter, right? And so I have watched some commentary about the movie that we're going to use sort of as a jumping off point for this. I am not any of those people that profess to understand movies and cinematography and why one script is better than another. I know we're going to get into some of the musical aspects. Robert is a musician, and so I'll let him be the expert in that area. But what we are looking for, as we do every week, is look for the lessons, in particular leadership lessons, life lessons, but leadership lessons in the things that we're discussing. And so we are doing that today in the context of the movie Sinners by Ryan Coogler, who is also the director and writer for the two Black Panther movies. He did 3 Creed movies, I believe. I think all 3 Creed movies, if I'm not mistaken. And then his first feature film, which was Fruitvale Station.
Mhm.
And so we'll be talking about some of the lessons that come out of that. I'll let Robert mention his, but for me, in our discussion of today's topic, what you mentioned and what stuck with me is the importance of sticking to your vision, right? And there are things that happen, obstacles that come along, people well-meaning, particularly in the movie industry, right? Who are well-meaning, who want to do things a particular way, and sometimes you have to push back on that. So sticking to your vision, and out of that, sort of obstacles are the way, right? That's a Stoic philosophy, that obstacles are the way. They're the path to you getting where you're going. And I've got some thoughts on what that means in particular to what we're talking about today. And then building a team, right? In particular, building a team that you can trust. And some of the things that Ryan Coogler has done over the course of the 5-6 movies that he's done that are consistent, right? And that flows from him having a team or some collaborators that he goes to time and time again, and how important that is for helping you, right? You have a vision, but you can't implement your vision by yourself, and it takes others, and that means having others buy into your vision, and we talk about that frequently here. So some opening thoughts, Robert?
No, I'm excited about this because when I saw the movie, I was thinking of it's one of those movies, and this is not a review, of course, but it's one of those movies that sticks with you after you see it. So when I noticed that, I was like, perhaps there's a way we can incorporate this, onto our show, because there are a lot of lessons there, particularly when I listened to how he brought this vision to life, or in the case of vampires, unlife. but he had to really do a couple of things really well, and I wanted to talk about that.
Okay. Why don't we start, even though this is not a movie review, brief overview of the movie, if you would like to just give sort of a short summary of the movie, and then let's dive into what we've got to talk about.
It's really hard to do because it's one of the things that this movie does really well is it focuses on different people in the movie have very pivotal roles, almost equally. So it's about these two brothers that they're twin brothers that go back to their hometown in Mississippi, and they have bad intentions. Right? They're trying to do something good, but they've done something bad in order to do something good. I don't want to spoil the movie for anybody. So they go home, they want to open up a juke joint, and they bring in some people that they know. There's some people that they need to make this thing come to life. It's kind of like making a movie, right? So they have some people they need to bring. Some people they need for signage. There's some people they need for food. There's some people they need for entertainment, and they they get their cousin involved in this, and he becomes a very pivotal part, really the fulcrum of the whole movie. And because of certain people's involvement, it attracts a negative element in the form of vampires, and that's all I'm going to say. So it's one of the things I love about this movie is it's not really a vampire movie. It is. It's not really a gangster movie. It is. It's not really a music movie, but it is. It does all of those things, and it weaves them together very well.
It's really interesting because when you brought this up, actually, and not even in the context of our show, but just asking me about the movie, I had seen it. It was not a movie that I was particularly familiar with. I had seen a trailer, and as I was watching the trailer, I was like, is this a vampire movie? Right. So from the trailer, I sort of thought it was. So I did what any smart person does. I Googled it, and it said that it was, a vampire movie of sorts. And so at that point, I formed an opinion that I wasn't going to break my neck to go see it.
Right.
Because it was like, that's just not my thing. And then I was having a back and forth with my sisters, and they were asking, are you going to see it? And I said, yeah, it's not my genre. I'm not really interested. And then I had a conversation with my husband, and he said, well, we should go and support it. And I agreed that we should support it. Here's the thing to support. Now, there are lots of different things, and then we can get into the other aspects of this. But this does tie in a little bit with the concept of vision and obstacles, right? So this movie, as of the date of our recording and airing, initial airing, this is the largest box office, most money-making original film since 2019. And original films are considered films that are not part of that are not a sequel, prequel, or part of some sort of franchise, right? And what's really interesting about that is that when movies are made, someone is always saying, doesn't Hollywood have any original ideas? That there's like these retreads, either of concepts, or they're just sequels and prequels to movies that we're and adding on, right? No, in no disrespect to MCUs and the other one, DC's and all, Star Wars and all of that. Right? There's a place for that.
Sure.
But are there some original ideas so that in order for original movies to be made, people have to support them? Right. And that becomes a thing. And so if you haven't seen it, I will just say, if you want more original movies to be made and not retreads and sequels and prequels, then go see this movie. Go see whatever original movies are out there, because that sends the message to the power brokers, right? The financiers, that money can be made in these movies. And so that's what I want to say about that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And in order for this, and so I'm just going to jump right in, because in order for this original movie to be made, Ryan Coogler had to overcome several obstacles and challenges. And the first one was negotiating with a very powerful studio. So he had to negotiate with Warner Brothers to get final cut rights. which is a big deal because many times, when we see a movie, a lot of times, and we're like, that movie was not so great, or that movie was good. If the movie's good, the studio takes credit for it, right? If the movie's not so good, we bash the director. And it's really interesting because a lot of times when a director has a vision, especially if they're the writer and director, they have a vision of what they want to see. And then they have to go through the studio to release this movie. And the studio will look at it and go, you know what? We don't like that. We're going to change this, and this. And the movie becomes a lot of times something different than what the creator intended it to be. And so he was able to successfully negotiate final cut rights. The movie that we see is actually his vision. And that's a big deal and a win for creatives in all spaces, because when you have a vision, it's worth fighting for. And if you're able to successfully negotiate that, it's a big deal. So the second thing that the second challenge was what he wanted to do was get something called first dollar gross points, which is he gets paid from the box office before the studio recoups their costs for making the movie. Not unheard of, but certainly a rare thing. So he was able to do that. He said, I spend a lot of time away from my family making these movies, and I wanted to, guarantee some return on that investment of spending my time on this thing which is really a passion project of his. And he was able to do that. Certainly people have done that before, even though people are making it seem like it hasn't been done. It has been done before. And then also he wanted to own the property, own the movie after 25 years. Certainly not unheard of, but it is rare. But he wanted to be able to own that. And that gives him the rights to do whatever he wants to with that property after 25 years, if I'm not mistaken. So people like Mel Gibson have done this before. Quentin Tarantino has done this before. George Lucas has done that. So it gives him some exclusive rights over. Will have ownership of something that he's very passionate about. And not every creator gets that.
And what I think is really important in that, particularly in the context that we play in the sandbox that we play in, right, is that we have CEOs, other C-suite executives, we have entrepreneurs, others who are leading companies and teams. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, and maybe this goes more to the point you made about studios, right? If the movie is successful, studios taking credit for it. If it's not, if it's blaming, right, the director, the writer, or, the editor. Sometimes it wasn't edited well, et cetera, et cetera. And we see that happen in corporate life as well, right? That when things are going well, when there is success, we see some of that happening now, not to get into the politics of things, but see some of that happening now in a, very well-known car company and its CEO and work that person is doing outside of that company. And now the board stepping in, while that person was doing whatever they were doing and it was serving the purpose of that company, board was letting it happen. When it starts to go another direction, boards like all of a sudden, we're looking at succession planning, right? And so it is about paying attention to what your vision is and absolutely sticking to it. But the part that I loved that you brought up that was part of his vision was ownership and taking ownership. And so we have to, as leaders, own the decisions that we make, right? We have to own the choices that we make. And Robert, I have an emergency, so continue. I'm going to step off for a second, and if you'll continue.
Yep, absolutely. So the next thing I really want to talk about is the how I took this. I looked at this and said, well, if we were coaching him or working with him, and we were using simple as a framework, where might all of these different things fall in place in this bucket here? So the first thing I did, of course, was look at self-awareness. And so what he did was he drew on his personal experience and his cultural heritage. And to do that, as people may or may not know, he started this process, or this came about through conversations with his uncle, who had grown up in Mississippi during that time period. And he would talk to his uncle about, and his uncle would talk about the characters. He would talk about the music. His uncle was a really big blues fan, and he would tell him about the music. And so Ryan Coogler would sit with him and listen to these blues records. But his uncle passed away, and as a way of honoring his uncle, he would listen to blues. And he said that, he would turn the lights off and he would listen to the blues, and it was almost like his uncle was there with him. And so this started to, create some awareness around, what he wanted to do with this particular project. And in order to do that and bring it to life, he had to know his values. And the values are really centered around your purpose. And he had to know his strengths as a director, what he could do to bring this very vivid picture he had in his mind to life, but on the big screen. So that's how self-awareness, I believe, played into this. And then the next portion of that would really be intentionality. And that's about really your mindset about what you're planning to do. When you're using intentionality, you're moving beyond just your awareness, and you're focusing your mind on some actions that you want to take. He certainly had to be intentional in negotiating for creative control with a very powerful studio. And when we talk about intentionality, we're really talking about being very deliberate. And so in asking for what he wanted, he had to take deliberate action. He had to look at the calculated risks that he needed to take, and then weigh that against the reward and say, okay, I'm going to ask for those three things that I mentioned earlier, creative control being that final cut, percentage of the box office before the studio recoups their costs, and of course, ownership of that property. So I think that's those two things being said, moving right on to mastery. And this is really about, when we talk about mastery on the show, a lot of times we talk about mastering your message. Mastering your message is so important when you're communicating with other people, because it really accentuates your credibility. So really mastering what he wanted to say to the studio by having a clear vision, by being able to articulate it in a way that was very clear so they could understand it. A lot of times when creatives talk to corporate people, the message gets lost. Apparently, he did a very good job doing that. The other thing is he's a very masterful director. He's able to take, what it is that he has in his head, his vision for the properties that he's directed, and really use his skill in a way that conveys, whatever it is that he's doing, whether it's action, whether it's those romance scenes. This particular movie had a little bit of everything. There was lots of action, lots of, well, I wouldn't call it romance, but there was some elements of that. A lot of different things went into this. So mastery is the third thing that we talk about. It's the third part of our simple framework. And then we talk about purpose or purposefulness. Here, it's really knowing the reason behind your actions or the goal that you want to achieve. And here, this is a movie, so the purpose, of course, is to entertain. It's to entertain. The movie does a really good job of that. Also, he wanted to make some statements. There's lots of different themes in this movie. There are themes when it comes to culture. There are themes when it comes to music. There are themes when it comes to, it shows depictions of family and friendships in a certain way. It makes cultural statements. It makes political statements. It makes statements about race and belonging. So he wanted to do that. And of course, since it is a product, he wanted to make money. So that's really knowing your purpose can really help you. And of course, when you're having those conversations with people, letting them know the purpose behind what you're doing is really important. And then we move on to leverage, which is, we're getting toward the end here. Leverage is about being able to look for those spaces, sometimes they're very small, sometimes they're bigger, where you can make the biggest impact. And sometimes it's about leveraging what you have as a leader, leveraging what you have as a manager, leveraging what you have as a creative to further your project, your product, or your service, what you're doing. So here he used his track record. The Ryan Coogler has a very good track record in Hollywood. The movies he produces have all been hits. So he wanted to leverage that. He also leveraged the fact that he does good work. We talk about that a lot on the show, that when you have a product or a service that you give, you really want to do good work, because that's going to help bring you some longevity. It's going to give you that positive word of mouth. It's also going to hopefully allow people to come back to your property, come back to your company to request for additional work from you. So I've gotten through most of my talking points. How are things with you? I'll get to the E in a minute, but I wanted to check in with you to see how you were doing.
Things are okay. I'll explain when we're done. So,
okay.
So I didn't, of course, get to hear what you said, so I can't comment on it. And I don't, so if I say something, why don't you finish up what you have, and then I'll bring up what I have. And if I duplicative, you can let me know.
So I'll just recap. So I'll just quickly. Okay. So what I did was I talked about how I looked at this from the framework of simple. When we talked about putting the show together, I said, if we were working with him or coaching him, how might we use simple to do that? And so I talked about self-awareness, really being able to look at his experiences with his uncle. That's how this really started with conversations with his uncle. Intentionality, that's really about your mindset. So I looked at how he was able to do that and negotiate successfully, right? Because he knew where to take those calculated risks and be intentional about that. Mastery, that goes without saying. It's his skill as a director, as a creative, but also in mastering the communication of his vision. In order to successfully negotiate, you have to say, here is the vision I have for this particular project. And if you can do that, you have a lot better chance of getting it to happen the way you would like it to. Then purposefulness, that's really about the reason or goal behind it. And, I talked about, entertain, it's a movie. Make a statement. There were lots of themes. I won't go over them all right now. I went over them, but there are lots of themes in the movie. And then, of course, to make money. That's how you create that win-win for the people that you're working with and for yourself. If you start into it and go, well, you know what, it may make money, it may not make money. That's not, people don't want to hear that. They want to hear how their investment in you is going to turn into an investment for them as well, in most cases. Then talked about leverage, how he leveraged his really excellent track record as a director. I think all of his, every single one of his movies have made a profit. And then also leveraged that. He also leveraged the fact that he does good work, right? It's not because not every movie that makes a profit is really a good movie. I mean, we've seen plenty of movies that I know I have. I've gone to, and it's like, I know it made a lot of money, but it wasn't necessarily a good movie. There are certain movies that there are called critic-proof movies that you can put that movie out, and it's automatically going to, in most cases, generate a profit. Of course, the property that comes to mind is Star Wars. It could, some of them are good movies. A lot of them are not. I'm just going to be honest. And I'm a Star Wars fan. Some of them are just not very good, but they usually generate big profit for the studio. We call them critic-proof movies. And so the last thing I was getting to was energy, right? That's the E. And energy really showed through, or was able to shine through his passion, right? His passion for this project, because he had such a personal connection to it, and he was able to do that. And because he had that energy, he was able to push boundaries. I hinted at this earlier. Is it a vampire movie? Yeah, it is. Is it a gangster movie? Yeah, it is. And there's a question mark there because it's all kind of blended together. Is it a movie about music? It is. But it's all of those things, and it's none of those things at the same time, which makes it something unique, right? So if you're into, and that's something that we forget. Like, there's nothing wrong with specializing in creating something that has one purpose. There's nothing wrong with that. But if we can create something that people can look at from different angles, and I'm talking about creating in the space of us as uh, consultants creating products for people that we give to them as a service, something that they could look at from many different angles, they're going to get more value out of it. And
Yeah.
so, because this movie does that, it has what's, it has what they say in the gaming world, replay value, right? So people will see the movie more than one time, because if you look at it from the horror aspect of it, there's a lot of different things that you could miss the first time. If you look at it from the music aspect of it, you may be missing some things too, because you have other things that are happening. And if you look at it from, the gangster kind of angle of it, you'll miss some things. And there are some, I don't, of course, this is not a movie review and I don't want to spoil anything for people that may see it, but there are a lot of name drops in the movie, musically, culturally. So it's a really well-rounded property. And so, I give kudos to him. It was a very well thought out project.
Something you said sparked a thought for me when it comes to, corporations and establishing their value proposition,
Mhm.
right? So you talked about, is it this kind of movie? Yeah, it is, but no, it's not, right? And one of the things that we have to do as entities, organizations, and then within those organizations is to have a value proposition, a reason that someone would choose us over
Someone else,
someone
yeah.
else, right? Why would they choose you as a coach or consultant over, consultant XYZ? Why would they choose, you know, um, the CEO as opposed to someone else as the CEO? And all of us has the potential to bring that value proposition. And it goes back to sort of the three things that I brought up initially, and you touched on them in your summation. But when you're sticking to your vision, it's about it is about you and your vision, but it's also not about you. And one of the things that I heard him say in a couple of different interviews, and then some things that I read, was that the movie, as much as it is a personal journey for him and it's rooted in his connection to the blues through his uncle, right, who migrated from Mississippi to California, as much as it is that, for him it is also about telling, connecting history, connecting the past to the present and the
Mhm.
present to the future. And he does that, weaving that through music. And in particular, there's a scene where that is very much on display, right? And so understanding that your value proposition isn't about you, it's about serving the needs of those that you serve or lead. And in his case, in the movies, the movie going audience. But in your case, as a leader, those that you're leading, or your shareholders, right? And in service to the company, your clients, your customers, and keeping that in mind, your value proposition, not about you, but about those that you are providing that value to. And so I saw a connection with that, going back to your points about vision. And then sort of one of the things that's important, we talk about this, getting feedback, right? Where do you find that balancing point, that tipping point in hearing feedback and then incorporating what makes sense for the vision so that you're not distracted or taken off track, right? So you can, if everyone buys into the vision, it's like, here's the goal, but how we get there can be done and achieved in different ways. And so he is, from all that I could gather in my research, is very collaborative. And I mentioned this at the beginning. He's got some consistencies in people that are part of his team. I'm going to mention a couple, but there are others beyond this. And I don't know if you got into this. Is Ludwig Golfenston, right? Or Golfston.
Yeah.
The music director, and then Michael B. Jordan, who has been in every movie that he has made. And the music producer, Ludwig, has been a part of creating the music. And music very much is what helps us to feel what we feel, the emotions, the emotional ride that we're taken on in movies. Music is very much a part of that. And I was reading about Ludwig's family. His father was a music teacher, and he studied blues and brought that to his son in Sweden, I think it is, right? And so for him, this was a full circle moment. And so having someone who is versatile, who gets your vision and wants to help you bring it to life, right? That's, as they would say in a MasterCard commercial, that's priceless, right? I believe it's MasterCard. It's priceless, right? Having members of your team who are all in on your vision so that they can help you bring it to life. Again, going to that point, you can come up with the vision, but you probably, in most cases, are not, and certainly not in making a movie, going to be able to achieve that by yourself. In running a company, you're not going to be able to achieve that by yourself. And so it matters who you bring along with you. And so my question would be, for you, one, in your vision, when, just something for you to stop and think about, when have you had to hold your ground as a leader when others were in disagreement? Right? You hold your ground as it relates to your vision, not necessarily the tactics to get to that end goal, but keeping the vision, because you mentioned this in movie making, the studio, and I've seen this. I've what's the show, Project Greenlight, right? I've watched a number of seasons of Project Greenlight, the original one, and then one a year or so ago that was a sort of a different iteration of that. And the director has a vision and is trying to implement it. Well, the studio is there to help, right? And in the case of the last iteration I saw, they were offering all kinds of suggestions to the director to improve the movie, and she wasn't having any of it. Right. And so there's a tipping point, because some of the suggestions, as I heard them, were things that I thought of. I was like, this is going to make your movie better. And she was stuck to her particular vision. So you've got to know when. Right. So in order to do that, you've got to be clear about what it is. And you need to recognize that there's a tension that is part of receiving feedback, staying focused, and moving forward, and being open to that. And then we talk about this all the time. If you're not going to take feedback from people, explaining why. And then going to the one of the other points you made about owning it. Then you own this, and you have to stand by it through the end. 25 years 25 years from now, 50 years from now, you have to stand by the decisions that you made, right? And so this, I'm going to tie this into some basketball
Mhm.
and having this conversation. So the Lakers Timberwolves series ended last night, game 5. The Timberwolves were up 3-1 in the series. In game 4, the coach, JJ Redick, made a decision to not substitute for his starters in the second half of the game. All right. Now, I don't know if this was vision so much as other things going on, but the bottom line was he made a decision to do it the way that he did, with consultation with the assistant coaches, etc. I was listening to a pregame or a portion of a pregame interview last night, and the reporter asked him whether or not he'd consulted with his the assistant coaches, and JJ Redick was put off by the question. I think ego wise, right? He had been bashed for not substituting. And the bottom line is this: you're in charge, you're the leader. Ultimately, whatever decisions you make, you have to live with and own them, whether you get the results you want or not. And this movie, right there, I've seen one, maybe two reviews that were less than positive. I'll put it like that. But pretty much everything I've seen, it's gotten rave reviews.
Mhm.
So much so that the second week's box office didn't fall off as much as movies typically do. And so the bottom line is, yes, have a vision, own it, stick to it, take input, but win, lose, or draw, you have to own the decisions that you make ultimately.
Well, I think it's very interesting when you were talking about you were talking, a lot of things jumped into my head. First and foremost, when you have a team that is consistent, you are more likely to have synergy, right? You're more likely to have that in systems thinking terms. We say emergence, right? Emergence is the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. You're going to create something that's way more than you envisioned on paper because you have that chemistry that's working very well together. And this is very you see this very clearly because now this is this group's, I'm talking about the group that works with Ryan Coogler. This is their 6th or 7th movie or something like that. They know each other.
Yes.
They know each other's strengths, weaknesses, foibles, whatever you want to call it, and they're able to work around that. It's also about friendship. A lot of people don't know this, but Ryan Coogler and Ludwig Göransson, they went to school together. That's where they met.
Yeah,
they're very close. And actually, Ryan Coogler was he officiated Ludwig's wedding. So they're very close. And when you have that kind of closeness, your friend's passion becomes your passion, right?
Mm-hmm.
You start to see that, and you can really see it and hear it in this movie. So synergy is one thing. You made a comment about the composer's father loving the blues. Ludwig's name was almost Albert from Albert King. Because his father loved the blues so much, he almost named him Albert after Albert King. So I don't know which is, Ludwig is it's a very Swedish name. So maybe he got the better of that. I don't know, Albert. I don't know too many Alberts, but it was so obviously, this composer who's from Sweden, who and blues is not their background, but he had an affinity for the blues. So when Ryan Coogler wanted to make this, they were both all in on this. And that's when you have a vision, it really helps when you have people that can understand your vision. So you don't have, they're right there with you. They're not working against you. They're going to bolster what you're bringing to the table every step of the way. They may have
challenging you, to make it better, right? Because we're not we are not bought into groupthink. Um,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
so, yes, you need a team that is about helping you realize the vision, but working with you to make it better. And that's what collaboration and the
Absolutely.
collective is about.
Absolutely, especially if that person is very skilled in something that you're not. Ryan Coogler is not a musician, at least far as I know in the way he tells it. Ludwig Göransson is. So, he's going to, as a composer, he's going to bring things, forward that the director didn't think about. And the other thing that you mentioned, it's like when you have a vision and you stick with your vision, and you want to stick with your vision, and someone else gives you some feedback. This is my anecdotal thing here, is that when your ego gets involved, that means you're probably not in the right place.
Mm.
Whenever you feel that egoic pushback, you're probably you're probably going against your working against yourself. So you need to be open. And look, we know, and we've talked about this, there are some fantastic CEOs out there, some fantastic C-suite people, but probably the reason why, or one of the contributing factors to them getting to that level, is ego. And
Mhm.
I've had some, I think I've told you this. I put a program together, and one of the executives just changed the name of it like midstream after the program had been running for like a month, because he liked the name better. It was like, really? But I was like, yeah, whatever. But you have to pick your battles. And so I did not use one of my magic coins then. I just let it go. But I did go back to the original name, because no one, we had already marketed it with the
Yeah.
original name. And he wanted to have a piece of it. And I get that. You already own it as the corporation. You don't need anything else. But when your ego gets involved to that level, you need to examine it. You need to turn on your self-awareness. Do some metacognition. Why am I thinking this way? Where are these thoughts coming from? To understand what's going on. You're probably working against yourself. I didn't see that episode of Project Greenlight, but how did things work out for that person that was fighting against the direction?
None of the movies that I'm aware of in Project Greenlight have ever been successful movies. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
There you have it. But it's one of those things. I mean, especially when you're working with, look, if you're creating something, if you're an instructional designer, or you're creating a workshop for an organization, you need to take the feedback from that organization, because they're going to own it, even unless unless you're just bringing in your product, and saying, this is my intellectual property. It doesn't change. I can license it to you. But in many cases, that's not the case. If you're working in an organization in that capacity, if you're doing OD work and you're design, they own it. And so
Absolutely.
when they say, hey, look, we want to add this, that, and the other thing, you need to be open to including those things. And if there's a reason, that you think they shouldn't be included, that's when you really have to initiate some master your message to those folks, to really explain why. I've had to do that on several occasions when I worked for other organizations, when they were asking for things that were not just harmful, but costly to the organization. And that, I made sure I led with that. It's like, this is going to cost you money that you can ill afford to lose here. It's not going to give you the results that you want. Certainly, I'm an employee here, but I'm also a consulting employee. I want to make sure that we do the best thing for the organization. And just because you want this thing doesn't mean that it's the proper thing at this particular moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to wrap up my thoughts on this, tying into team, this last couple of things, and bringing simple into it, is right, asking the question, if you have the right people around you, right, who can carry the vision when you can't, right, that can win, because we're all going to go through things emotionally, obstacles that are external to the project or our life, whatever. Are those people that you have chosen to surround yourself with, right, your team members, Are they ones who are going to carry the vision forward and help you to stay committed to the vision, the big picture vision? And in order to know whether or not you've done that, you've got to start with some self-awareness. What kind of support do you actually need? Right? Instead of looking for people who are like you, who are the people who fill the gaps of expertise or experience that you don't have, right? So knowing what kind of support you need, and then leveraging, choosing the right people that can elevate what you're doing, help you elevate what you're
Right.
doing. And often we get lost, consciously or unconsciously, is it subconsciously, unconsciously, whichever one it is, right? With not wanting to have people around us who will outshine us,
Hmm.
right? And so maybe to get your vision to the goal line, right? The end zone, that it is about leveraging people that may outshine you,
Right.
right? And to be okay with that.
Yeah, and this is it's really interesting because when you were talking before and you segued over into basketball, what jumped into my mind and the connection is when you're a leader, you may have stars on your team. And it's sometimes really hard. I'm talking about when you're in the office. Sometimes it's hard to manage stars because stars usually know they are stars. Um, and you have to be able to handle those stars with some depth. You have to be
Yeah.
depth when you do that. There are some people that they're not that good at doing that. So stars want to shine, and you have to give them the opportunity to do that, but it can't be at the expense of the team. And we see that a lot of times, and just going back to basketball, we see that a lot in basketball, where you have one person, it's more worried about their numbers than the team winning. That is, we call that sub optimization. That's not going to be helpful for the team. So you have to be really skilled at managing, the whole team and those stars. And so perhaps for a future episode, we can talk about that, because that's what jumped into my head.
Yeah, let's do it. And just piggybacking on what you just said, it tying back into the movie, Ryan Coogler is the director, right? The conductor of the orchestra. Um, but everyone has a part to play, which means people are going to shine in their zones of genius. And so he's not the actor, he's not the lead actor. He didn't play roles in the movie. He did not write the scores, right? He did not write the music, compose the music. And to let those things shine, because they need to shine in order for all the pieces to come together, right? And you're a musician and you played in bands. I played in orchestra. It's been a long time, but played in orchestra. It takes all the pieces, the melody, the harmony, the first chairs, the second chairs, the third chairs, right? The woodwinds, the brass section, the percussion, right? It takes all the pieces, and each person playing their unique part, however much or little solos, the choruses, all of that. It takes all of that in order to have something that people, right? Again, going back to the value proposition, that people want to hear, that they want to pay for, that they want to enjoy, and that takes them on an emotional ride that lets them know in the end, my life is better because I've had this experience.
Yeah, when we talk about the music thing, and this is the same in any endeavor, whether it's putting a movie together, whether it's running a team in an office. Sometimes, let's use music as an analogy here. Sometimes the most boring part is the part that holds everything together. I'm a bass player, and there, I have skill. I can, fly up and down the fretboard. I don't, because that's not what my instrument is called to do. My instrument is to bridge between the rhythm, the harmony, and the harmony. So I want to play the part that's going to best serve the song. I don't always do that, but that's what we're reaching for as musicians, and as a bass player, I reach for that. But you have to find just the right part, and sometimes that part could be very boring. Everybody's job in an organization is important.
Yes.
And sometimes organizations, when they do retrenchment, which is getting rid of certain things because they want to maximize their cost savings. Sometimes they get rid of things that they don't realize are essential until those things are gone, and those things were actually holding together certain aspects of the organization. So we need to have that awareness, but also as an employee, you doing that job well is helping other people do their jobs well. Sometimes we get caught up in that. It's not saying that you shouldn't want to move up. Of course you should, if that's what you choose to do. But every job is important.
Yes.
And creates the overall product or project that we're doing. It makes it successful. So I think that's really important. And sometimes we forget that. And we're using this from the standpoint of movies. Sometimes in movies, a character can come in and have one line, and that's the fulcrum that everything they shift the entire movie because of that one line or that one scene. So those things can be very important.
Absolutely. Right. And it ties back to, wrap this up with the basketball. Everyone has a role to play, right? Every team cannot have 5 stars, right? We're in an era where we sort of work with 2 or 3, but it's the others, right? That, as Shaq would say, Shaquille O'Neal would say, it's the others, right? That they play that role. And in our organizations, it's not the stars, right? Your high performers or your C-suite people. It's the collective, and everyone doing their part, doing their role, from the receptionist to the CEO, everyone understanding what their role is and then doing that role. And as you said, there's nothing wrong with aspiring to do something else, to move up, to be better in the role that you have, or move out into some other role. But while you're in the role that you're in, you have to do that role. You have to do service, as they say, to that role, bring value in what it is you're there to do.
Yep. Well, that's all I got.
Awesome.
So we got good timing.
Awesome. Well, if someone wanted to work on their vision, right? But help to build a team, work through those obstacles, right? Because obstacles, after all, are the way. They're the path. How would they get in touch with you to be able to work with you to do that?
They can send me an email at inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching.com, or they can just go to my website, Robert Hilliard Coaching, and go to that contact page and fill it out. Let me know what goals you have, what challenges you're experiencing. We can set up a discovery call and decide whether or not we'd be a good match for each other.
Awesome. And likewise, you can reach out to me at shiftingintoaction.now.site, shiftingintoaction.now.site. Complete the form there, and we can explore whether or not we're a good fit. And so with that, we want to thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. If you are interested in being a guest on the program, want to talk about your leadership journey, the lessons you've learned, or how you are helping others to lead better, please reach out to Robert or I. We would love to talk with you to see if you're a good fit for the show. or if you've got a topic that you would like for us to explore. And we are always looking for something that is relevant in the news. And we're branching out into other areas, bringing things in, stories, children's stories, movies, right? Sports, we're bringing those lessons that come from different things. So if you see something, say something, reach out to us, let us know. We would love to talk to you about your topic and seeing if it makes sense for our show. So, with that, again, thank you for joining us. If you are watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and share. If you're watching on another platform, please feel free. Leave a comment. Let us know. Did you watch this live? You watch it in replay? And what are some of the lessons that you took from watching Sinners or some other movie, if you've watched another movie that has some of the same lessons that we discussed today? So, with that, we want to thank you. And until next time, take care.
Bye now.